Chapter 39. A Noteworthy Neighbor. The crab scuttled sideways across the black sand. "There he goes," shouted Beau. "Si, come on, don't be such a listrissa. Pick him up, pick him up." I hurried to catch the creature before it reached the shoreline. I grabbed the back of its shell with both hands, careful to keep my fingers away from its front claws, which snapped furiously at me. "I got him! Tripe, he's a monster! Help me with him." Beau rushed in to pin the creature down with the prongs of the crab spear he had made from a fallen tree branch. Once he had it secured, I adjusted my grip and lifted it up by its menacing front claws. "You can just call me the Crab Master from now on. Thank you very much." Beau nodded approvingly. "Not bad. That's 4 for you, but we can count him as 5 since he's so big. Still doesn't come close to my record." I held the struggling crab at arm's length as we walked up the beach to our shelter. "True, but when it comes to clams, I've got you beat." Beau covered his ears and made a gagging face. "The horrors! Do not speak of them!" When we reached our shelter, I tossed the crab into the pit with the others we'd caught that afternoon. I flopped down onto my mat of dried ferns, tired but happy at the thought of the monstrous dinner we were about to eat. We had dragged what was left of our sad little rowboat onto the beach and used branches to enclose a leafy sort of hut that looked out to sea. With our fire pit going, it was fairly cozy. Beau bowed to me and made a flourish with one hand. "How would you like your crab prepared tonight, madam?" I smoothed my fingers over an imaginary fancy hairdo. "Sautéed with scallions and dipped in fresh chili oil, if you please." How about we hold him over an open flame just long enough to stop him from pinching your nose off?" Delightful. While Beau stoked the fire, I tended to the little stone altar we had set up beside the boat. We had put out offerings of fresh water and fruit, and Beau had woven a small garland of flowers. We had no incense, but the smoke from our fire smelled sweet and clean. Surely the spirits here would feel honored. We certainly owed them our thanks for letting us stay in a place like this. A clear stream of icy fresh water trickled out from the mountain behind us, running down to the shore. Lush trees covered the slopes that cradled our black sandy beach. Some of those trees bore fruit, a green, watery sort of apple, and sticky, dark berries that tasted like tamarind candy. Best of all, the beach and tide pools teemed with easy food: shrimp, crab, and octopus, so much that we didn't even have to look at the clams. That night, we ate until we were ready to burst. I slurped the last of the crab meat out of its shell and held it out to Beau. "Here you go. All that's left are the brains. Your favorite." When he didn't answer, I looked up and saw that he'd gone down to the edge of the beach. I stood up and walked out to join him. It had been 5 days since we'd left our rocky island, and Beau had almost fully recovered thanks to the fire and plenty of food and fresh water. The morning he woke up and told me in 3 languages that I smelled like a goat's backside was the day I knew he was going to pull through. He was now back to his sharp-tongued self, though I often found him gazing out at the sea, watching the horizon for something I could only guess at. Tonight, a full moon cast wavy white beams over the ocean like a lighthouse. When Beau heard me coming across the sand, he turned around. "I don't think the Sunderlands is the right name for this place," he said. "It sounds too sad. Maybe there's a name in Pramong for it." Beau's dimple sank deeper in his cheek. "We should write the Queen and tell her she needs to send lineals to those fishermen. They found this place first. Mapped it, too." I tilted my head. "Maybe. But Master Payun told me once that every place he ever went had already been discovered by someone else. So maybe that Pramong mapper wasn't the first either." I looked out to the headland where I knew the white whales would put on their morning show, leaping in the air and crashing down on their backs. If anyone had ever come to a place this beautiful before, surely they would never have left. I wondered if one morning we would wake up to find people crossing the beach toward us. So far, we seemed to be alone. Beau shifted his weight, and I could feel him sink lower in the sand, as if he wanted to anchor himself there forever. The next morning we woke up early and set out to explore the area around our cove. It was Beau's turn to wear my cloak, and I flapped my arms at my sides to get my blood pumping. The tops of the trees fluttered back in the cold breeze coming off the sea. The summer was fading fast, and a rickety lean-to wasn't going to protect us much longer. We needed to either build or find a proper shelter. "I'll head up this way, into the trees," called Beau. "Why don't you have a look around that curve and see if we can get over the rocks to the next bay?" I rolled my eyes at him, since I'd already been planning to do exactly what he described. I picked my way over the boulders near the shore, heading for the cliffs that enclosed our little cove. When I got closer, I realized that the folds in the rock hid the opening to a cave. A cave could be just what we needed, as long as it was dry and protected from the wind. When I stepped inside, the sound of waves crashing onto the beach hushed to a rhythmic swish. The cave was damp and sandy at the entrance, but dry farther back. The stone ceiling dipped lower there, too. With enough fern padding and a roaring fire, we could make it nice and toasty. Just as I was ready to get Beau and gloat about my shelter-finding abilities, I felt a gust of cool air blow onto me from the back of the cave. I walked farther in, squinting. At the back of the chamber, I could make out a faint glow of light. I frowned. The cave might not work for shelter if it was open to the elements on both sides. I continued back, bracing my hands against the rock for balance. The steady roll of the waves grew louder, and a sweet, musky smell filled my nostrils. I ran my hands along the back wall, feeling for the source of the breeze. The wall curled in on itself, hiding a crack as tall as a man, but not quite wide enough for a man to walk through. The flaky rock crunched under my feet as I pressed closer to the crack and put my face to it. There was another cave, larger than this one, with a wide mouth that opened right over the water on the other side. The rising sun shone straight into the cavernous room, making it sparkle as if the light bounced off 1,000 tiny mirrors. No, not mirrors. Scales. My heart thudded in my ears as I registered what I was looking at. The snake's long body coiled around itself in a tight spiral. This was how I'd seen her that first time during the storm, when she had wrapped herself around our rudder, dooming us to the worst of the squall. My eyes followed her long, muscled body to the center of the spiral. She encircled a clutch of 4 eggs resting on top of a mound of sand and flaky stone. The snake's breathing halted, and she stirred. I jumped back from the crack. Had she smelled me? But even if she had, she wouldn't be able to get to me through that tiny sliver of space. Cautious, I leaned forward until I could get a clear view of her again. Her beard dangled limply from her chin as she lifted her head. Pressing her stubby clawed feet against the cave floor, she dragged herself in a tighter circle around her nest. The eggs looked small and out of place beside her hulking body. Each one was about the length of a loaf of bread. The sunlight glowed through their rubbery shells. One of the eggs throbbed twice, then went still again. Gently, the snake dug her snoot into the crushed rock at the base of the nest, scooping it up higher around the eggs. She did this several times before settling back down. She lay with her head turned out to sea, her great body rising and falling steadily with every breath. Lying in that circular coil, she looked like the emblem for Menkhan's kingdom. The tail is the teeth. I stood very still, just watching her, listening to her sleep. I remembered the stories Dumpling had told me on board the Prosperity. She guards the Sunderlands, devouring any ships that wander near. The beast I watched had no idea just how many ships were on their way. Soon people would overcome their fear of dragons and come with nets and harpoons. She might sink a score of ships in the meantime, but eventually they'd catch her. They'd pry off her dark scales, punch a hole through each one and thread them on strings of leather, make her hawes into truth-telling glasses, just like the one sitting deep in my pocket. They would mount her head in the Queen's new museum. What a prize she would be, the Slake of the Sunderlands. I leaned my forehead to rest on the cave wall and shut my eyes. And if those things happened, I would have been the person who led them to her. I watched her 1 minute more, then withdrew from the crack in the stone. Now that I knew who our neighbor was, we'd have to move out of our cove. I wasn't a fool. The slake was beautiful, but I knew what she was capable of. As I stepped out of the cave, I saw Beau jogging toward me across the beach. "Well," he called out, "what'd you find?" I couldn't help but smile. I found out I owed Dumpling an apology.